I've been out. I've been in the streets. I've talked to reporters. I've written articles. I've talked to elected officials. I worked in elected office. I don't know what more I personally can do.
5 years after George Floyd's murder and the racial reckoning of 2020, a Pew Research study finds that most, 72% to be exact, of Americans say nothing has changed. So what exactly happened? What do you think, Ron?
Nothing has changed. This has been going on for years. As a black man, I feel it all the time. You know, when I wake up in the morning, I gotta figure out what am I gonna wear, what am I gonna do. When I'm around police officers, I feel uncomfortable. So it's something that's systemic.
Was that different before 2020? I mean, was that still the case pre-2020?
No, it's been like that always. Yeah. It's just that it's been affecting other communities now. You know, now we have the new administration, you know, taking folks out of their homes and really, you know, treating them harshly. But that's been going on for black people for years.
So Daunasia, you are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. You have been involved with this work for a long time. How's it look from your perspective in the past 5 years?
I think I would agree with folks that say not enough has changed, right? We're still fighting the same fight that the Black Panthers were fighting, right? We're still worried about fair education for our kids. We're still worried about fair housing and affordable housing. We're still really worried about the basics and surviving as community and being able to invest in ourselves and be able to support each other. And I think that people are right that not enough has changed in the past 5 years, in the past 55 years, perhaps not in longer than that.
And Rahsaan, I mean, the Urban League has been on the ground and also just put out its own report about how things have fared for Black Americans 5 years since 2020. And how would you say that the Urban League is navigating this moment when people are feeling like nothing has improved?
Yeah, we're committed to our D3 campaign, which is defending democracy, demand diversity, and defeating poverty. And that is consistent with the work that we've always done. And like Ron and Daunasia have pointed out, some of the experiences of black people pre-2020, the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others, is consistent with what we're experiencing today. And that's why it's the role of civil society organizations, civil rights organizations, to continue to do that advocacy. There have been some changes. There have been some laws that have been implemented. But the day-to-day experience of people, particularly black people living in poverty, has not significantly changed.
Now, Hodan, you jumped into all of this at a fairly young age. Do you mind me asking how old you were in 2020?
I was 21 years old, a baby.
And you were organizing then.
I was organizing, yeah, and it kind of happened by accident, honestly. I had just finished school, and, you know, I just saw all the rhetoric online, and, you know, I'm a part of the generation that grew up on the internet that, you know, watched this all happen in real time, like watch Black bodies on Twitter every single day. And so in 2020, it just felt like we should say something. Our voices do matter. And that was, I think, the first time where I felt like we should all be using our individual voices, no matter how young we are, no matter how much experience we have. And so we just did it. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, but we threw ourselves in and, yeah, made it happen.
So how are you feeling 5 years later?
Deep
sigh, deep ancestral sigh.
It doesn't feel like much has changed. I feel like the entirety of my adult life has been waiting for this change that everyone has been talking about to come, waiting for this change that we've been fighting for to come. And a lot of people older than me will say, like, this is exhausting, this is tiring. I'm 26 years old and I'm exhausted. And I don't see change coming. I don't see anything changing. And it's hard feeling like no matter what we do or how loud we scream or how we use our voices, everything kind of stays the same. Yeah.
And if I can, I will just say that I do want us to recognize that there's a backlash to the work that we have done. And so that our work is not necessarily in vain in the fact that maybe we haven't made the progress that we would want to make, but that that work has been recognized and there's a counteraction to that, right? And that's what we've seen with this new administration.
Well, also our history is being erased. As we're doing marches, we're doing rallies, we're getting out information, but there's another side. We're not being so-called racially profiled, but our history is being erased. That's why I like this panel, because it's an intergenerational connection.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the OG on the panel, so the baby boomer. But it's good to hear young people. Right? We need all perspectives, all ages, all people.
Well, speaking of that very fact, Ron, we hit the streets in Roxbury to ask people if they think things have changed 5 years later.
5 years after the racial reckoning around the murder of George Floyd, do you think anything has changed?
No, because it's still happening. I still see it happening.
No, not really.
No, absolutely not. Between racism, anti-Semitism, it has just risen.
I feel like among the community, people have been more aware of how they communicate with each other, but I think systematically, we still have work to do.
I don't really think anything has changed. We still have injustice happening.
I don't think there's been a societal change in the sense that people feel like what they went on the streets for is achieved.
A lot of people are much more open to conversations that maybe back in 2018, 2019 just would not have been on the table. I do think, though, ultimately there are a lot of structural issues that have yet to be resolved.
So, Rahsaan, hearing this, you mentioned that some things have improved, right? But why is that not resonating on an everyday level?
I think when people walk out of their door and their community looks the same, when they're at the same employment or lack of employment, when they're seeing violence in their community, when they're being interacted with by the police in the same way, it's hard to make an assessment that things have significantly changed. I will say, on one end, police killings have peaked in 2024. It's been at its highest ever, 1,365, I think, were killed by police in 2024. But Massachusetts has seen a substantial decline, 75% in police killings. So there are some changes, but it's not the systemic overhaul that people are looking for. Same thing with employment. There was an uptick in employment. DEI initiatives brought a lot of people into buildings, but like Daunasia pointed out, that backlash really led to significant decreases and terminations of a lot of people. So it's just like the more we see something change, the more things we see stay the same.
And I should point out that a Harvard study in 2023 noted that Black Bostonians reported feeling harassed and targeted at higher rates than other groups, right? So that was 3 years after all of these reforms that we saw. We know that Boston implemented an Office of Police Accountability and Transparency that had a lot of turnover. At one point, the website was dark. It wasn't really clear what was going on. And so it just raises these questions of systemically, Daunasia, all of these efforts that were being put into place sounded great at the time, but why did they lose steam?
I think our society is really minute to minute, right? I think that we lose track of things. I think that especially when folks are not directly affected or feel that they're not directly affected, it's easy to say, rah, 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 go to the march and then not do the follow-up work, right? And so I think that's also part of what we're seeing now is that more people are recognizing that they fall under the umbrella of the undesirables. And so they need to be part of the movement. And that's what we've been saying in Black Lives Matter the entire time, is that Black Lives Matter is the call to action for all of us, for all people, and that when Black people are free, then the world will be free.
And so, Ron, you're organizing a rally, a march and a rally for George and for justice this week. How are you mobilizing people to come out and join you?
We're telling them, because of relationships. Relationships is the key to organizing, and we're going to the schools, the colleges, the churches, where people are at, meeting them where they are. And I think it's important to recognize the fact that we're giving out the Black Book, which is very important. We have these splashy rallies. We have these splashy rallies, and people go home, and then they're excited, but they don't do anything, no follow-up.
And what is in the Black Book?
In the Black Book, it's a resource guide, pocket-sized, like a passport, and it talks about civil rights, voting rights, racial profiling, immigrant rights, and police brutality. These are the civil rights that are commonly violated and people don't report them. And your civil rights can be violated by government officials, as we see today. So I think it's important that it's not the end-all. It's not going to solve all the problems, but at least you have a starting point.
So, Hodan, you mentioned earlier that you feel exhausted, right? And I think so many people can relate to the point where if you go on TikTok, for instance, anytime there's a protest being organized, there is a creator after creator being like, Black folks, we're not doing this. We're staying at home, right? Can you relate to that?
Yes and no.
I'm sorry, Ron. I'm not trying to do that.
I'll be there. Listen,
I done gave you your Black book in advance.
listen, I have my copy. I will be there on Thursday. But I feel the sentiment. I remember last November, right after Donald Trump won the election, I actually wrote a Medium article because I was like, I don't want to go outside. I don't want to do any of this, but I do want to write how I'm feeling down. And a lot of what I was writing about was, I've been out. I've been in the streets. I've talked to reporters. I've written articles. I've talked to elected officials. I worked in elected office. I don't know what more I personally can do. But it's like, it's a push and pull. Like when it's something that you care so deeply about, like the exhaustion is there, but like the will to want to change things and the will to want to continue the conversation is also still there. I think I've gotten to a place with myself now where I'm like, you will show up as an organizer no matter what space you occupy. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you are in corporate, if you are in government, if you're an artist, there are ways to show up. And so as long as you are kind of holding that and honoring that, like that is enough. And so that's the space that I keep myself grounded in now.
Are there other forms of protests that you would like to see take ground?
I mean, I want to see all of it, really. But I think for me specifically, being so young during 2020, I really, really care about like youth organizing, youth activism. I think that there's a lot that we can do to make sure that young people feel like their voices matter and that they're heard and that they don't have to have the perfect language to be able to talk about the things that they literally experience, right? Like being able to talk about your experience is enough and should be enough. And so I will always be a voice for making sure that young kids are a part of this movement. My youngest sister is 11 years old, and she can talk about these things, right? And so we should be creating those spaces as much as we're creating every other space. So, yeah.
Rahsaan, why can't we afford to get tired?
It's interesting because thinking about, why there's this feeling of exhaustion. We can't afford because two things. One, because somebody didn't get exhausted for us to be where we are. And two, there's somebody that's looking to us not to be exhausted down the road. And I think that's what the critical piece is. Our history and presence in this country tells a long narrative of the resilience of people of African descent. Despite the challenges, the oppression, the violence, the death that we have historically faced and continue to face, we still were resilient and resistant and pushed back. And this pendulum swings back and forth. Every time there is some progress, there is some regression. But the movement, generally speaking, is towards progress. And we need to continue to keep moving towards progress.
And the Urban League and the NAACP have been just two organizations that have been instrumental in this work over decades. At the same time, though, there has been some generational pushback that these organizations are not doing enough and are not. You taking a deep ancestral sigh yourself.
We just turned 106 years old last week, and that's it, right? The things that were going on in 1919 are very similar, but they're not the exact same things. And the people that we are trying to mobilize are not the same people, and the issues that they are facing and experiencing and their understanding and orientation to the world is very different. The access to information they have. So we have to be malleable to respond to the needs, the interests, and the concerns of people.
Does that?
I was just going to say, you had asked the question, has things changed? In 1992, when I started Dunk the Vote in response to the Charles Stewart murder, when a pregnant woman was allegedly killed by her husband, ended up being her husband.
There's a great Boston Globe podcast by Adrian Walker about this, if anybody needs to
And I was giving out Driving While Black packets in 1992, and now we're giving out the Black Book. I mean, so that goes to show you that it's still relevant.
Hodan, go ahead, Daunasia.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think something that I try to bring to my work, and especially talking to people my age and older, is the parable of the choir, right? That like, it doesn't take all of us all of the time. It takes some of us some of the time, right? That we, like you were saying, have to put in what we can. If that's art, if that's music, if that's, a religious center, if that's whatever your sector is, whatever your work is, wherever your family is, your community.
Right, because
stepping in as you can. And so that also gives other people the chance to breathe. We don't always have to be the ones leading the march. Someone else is going to lead the march.
We're going to be there.
And we're going to be there, right, to support it.
I was waiting for that.
Well, I was just going to ask Hodan if what you're hearing speaks to you when you think about your generation. Is this something a concept you can get behind?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about intergenerational organizing, I think it's twofold, right? It's my generation really looking to what has happened before, looking at the history, looking at how far we've come, and acknowledging that and holding space for that. But it's also, I think, older generations kind of looking to us and seeing we organize in very different ways. Individualism is very important to us, and so finding ways to bring those two things together and really work together across generations. I think that's the way that we do it.
Now, Daunasia, Black Lives Matter, of course, is another iteration of this movement, and we've talked about that, but we also know that Black Lives Matter has faced some criticism. Even in 2020 alone, in June, there was a 67% backing from Americans for the movement. By September, it had dropped to 55%, and now it's down to 50%. And there's been controversy, right? There was the whole thing with the mansion, the $6 million mansion that had been purchased, but specifically to create a safe space for activists. So do you think that people are still behind the movement in the way that they were in 2020, or even when Trayvon Martin was killed?
I think that, like I said, with the parable of the choir, I think people get tired of not necessarily seeing the progress that they want to see. I also will say that there's a difference between Black people getting tired and other folks getting tired, right? And so I do think that there definitely, I saw immediately almost in 2020 just okay, we did the black box thing, and now what? Yeah. And people just moving on, essentially, which was really disheartening at the time. I remember that. But I do think that there are, valid criticisms of any movement or of any organization, but that when you believe in the work, that's what matters, right? So whatever you call it, like I said, whatever you call it, wherever you're coming from and whoever you're connecting to, as long as you are doing it. And I think that it matters less tearing down what other people are doing or what organizations do exist. Create your own.
Well, the other piece is that there's always something going on. Derek Chauvin may be getting out of prison who killed George Floyd. And one of the things we're doing in the march, we're going for 9 minutes and 29 seconds of time that Derek Chauvin put his foot on George Floyd's neck. People get a chance to feel it in real time. So I think that, people really need to just stay focused. The struggle is going to continue. I've been organizing nearly 40 years, and I'm not tired. And I feed off the energy from younger people.
And there's so many different iterations, sub-movements within the movement, right? Because we know, Rahsaan, you mentioned Breonna Taylor, right? We know that the officers involved with Breonna Taylor weren't charged with murder, but it was the wanton endangerment and some other connected charges. We also know that queer lives, for instance, are continuing to be fought for in a subcategory of the Black Lives Matter movement. And do you think that people are recognizing that to be part of all of this, or is it still its own separate fight?
I would say from my experience inside of Black Lives Matter movement, it's always been a global solidarity movement, right? It's always included trans lives. It's always included Palestinian lives. It's always included people of the global majority who are oppressed across this earth. And so that's not changed for me and the folks that I organize with and my comrades. But I do think that that's a message that we need to be getting out and making sure that people do know that. Again, as I said, I think some people are realizing that they fall under the umbrella that they didn't think that they did. And I would say that there's room for you. Come, please, join us.
So I'm going to ask each of you a question. We ask everyone who comes here to GBH News Rooted. When you think about 5 years since 2020, what is one thing that is keeping you rooted now?
Yeah, I think it's the legacy of struggle, resistance, and overcoming that Black people in particular, but marginalized and oppressed people have been a part of consistently. I feel like I am an extension of that, and it's my obligation to continue that work, and that's what keeps me rooted.
Hodan?
I would say individual stories. Like, we are talking about this big movement, and I think a lot of the times it's very easy to get lost in kind of the bigness and the fullness of it, but talking to people one by one, hearing people's individual stories and hearing how they interact with all of this, I think that that is so important, and I want to see, you know, more storytelling. I want to see more people being able to share, and I want to be a part of that. I want to be able to tell people stories and tell the uniqueness of everyone's experience and how they interact, and so that's what keeps me in the work.
I think remaining grounded in history and knowing, for example, that the Nottoway plantation that just burned down was built in 1859. Civil War started 1861. So there was never a plan to slow down or to stop slavery, right? And so I think when we see things happening now, that it's like, well, they're building the machine to kill us, but we can still burn it down.
And Ron?
It's in my DNA. My mom was an activist. She was one of the folks who helped start Roxbury Tents of Harvard when they fought for affordable housing, and now they own the property. And I love people, and particularly black people. It's in me.
Me too. Yeah. Amen.
That's good. Amen.
Amen. And 5 years from now, where do you think the movement will be by then?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that it will be in a better place. I had the benefit of listening to a futurist, Trista Harris, and she said two things. One, we need to stop making the problem the guest of honor at the party. But two, that we need to be intentional about creating time to ideate on what the future will look like. Yeah. Yeah. And so the future that I'm creating, envisioning, and casting for myself is one where there is more robust opportunity, health, wellness, and transformation for black folks.
Absolutely. That.
That's lovely. Right? That's it. That says it all, right? When you're going to co-sign, everybody going to co-sign that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's really hard, right? Because it takes up so much. To your earlier point, Ron, like, so much is coming down day after day after day. It's DEI backlash, just this company changing their language. It's people getting arrested on their way to work by ICE, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be easy to get tired, but I love that. Like, don't make it. What problem? Who is that?
Right.
Keep on keeping on. Fight the good fight.
And that's resistance
we
as
win
well.
in the
Our
end.
joy is resistance.
Yes.
We win in the end.
Hello, boots on the ground. That's a war. That's a war march. That's a battle dance.
It speaks to this idea of fatigue, right? Like, because there's all these posts about, like, the world is on fire, but black people are learning a new line dance.
Yes, we are.
We're a resilient folk.
Yes,
We've been through this. We've seen it before. And we just keep on striving.
100%. Well, Rahsaan, Hodan, Daunasia, and Ron, I want to thank each of you so very much. This has been wonderful, and we hope you come back sometime.
Thank you.
I hope the march goes well.
Get your black book.
Be there.